Hey, welcome back, everybody. It's time for some real assurance, some real support, some real advice, and some real conversations about the real insurance you need to protect and grow your business today. With the real deal, Mr. Insurance himself, Eddy Canavan. Hey, Eddy.
Hey, Paul. Thanks for having me today.
Well, I got to tell you, I'm going to tell you what I told everybody. This is a new show for us, and when I got started, I thought, well, we're just going to talk about, deductibles and, different kinds of commercial liability policies. And I thought, is this really going to go into stuff? I probably know all this stuff. And last week, you blew my mind when you started walking through laws that are out there and things that are coming and questions that remain. Like, can you randomly drug test somebody and they find they have a little bit of cannabis still in their body because that's the way it works, but it was 3 days ago, but you get to fire them even though they're not under the influence. And wow, there were a whole bunch of those things that I didn't anticipate.
Right. So today's episode is really in that same vein, in that for the last 2 decades in California, and as an employer, you may not agree with this or feel this, but it's true. In the last 20 years, we've had some very good reforms, some very good laws that have helped stabilize the costs of workers' compensation in California. There are some bills on the horizon on Newsom's desk that we unpacked on our last episode,
right, that
if signed will complicate workers' compensation. My opinion is that it will result in premiums increasing. And so how, as you as an employer, how can you stop that from happening? I think it's two things. One is you prevent injuries from happening. Right. The best claim is no claim. But the second is that when a claim happens, understand what that other person is going through. So then you can show empathy, understanding, caring, so that they feel that they're being taken care of. And when an injured worker feels like they're being taken care of, their recovery is usually much quicker. When they feel like that they are being ostracized, when they feel like they are being alienated, that the employer is their enemy, then guess what? You're going to have a really, really bad claim.
All right, so I got to unpack some of this stuff because you're throwing so many things out there. Again, I'm going, what? Really? So the first is, you're telling me that, because we always think, government and regulation, and particularly, I'm sorry, all of us businesses in California think we're overregulated and overtaxed, and maybe we are, I don't know, but that's a general complaint I hear in this studio over and over and over again. You're saying that there were some laws passed that did kind of stabilize workman's comp costs. I never heard that before.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going back 20 years, but I've been doing this for 30 years. So the first was Senate Bill 899 in 2003 that was passed by Governor Schwarzenegger. Workers' compensation was one of his biggest platforms. You had several employers threatening to leave the state. You had Costco threatening to take their distribution centers out of California. So he really took that to heart, and he really championed a bill, signed a bill that did numerous things that we are going to discuss through this journey of the injured worker. But then Governor Brown in 2012 signed Senate Bill 863. And what that did is it looked at that prior bill 10 years ago and it said, okay, this stuff worked, this stuff did not work. How can we build a better mousetrap? And they did. And Brown signed that bill, and it helped. We are now 10 years later. And usually it's always around a governor's race. Newsom is coming up for re-election.
Clearly.
And the pendulum has really swung towards the employer for so long that the consensus in Sacramento is now the pendulum is going to start swinging the other way. And next legislative session, half of the legislators in Sacramento will be new.
Half of them will be again, I didn't know that either. Okay.
So they will not know how to spell work comp. They will be listening to their constituents. They're going to be listening to the people that help them get there.
Right.
And so we as employers, I'm an employer, I have 5 employees. We as employers need to really make sure we understand this process, understand how to keep our people safe, and understand that when something happens, that human being did not expect to happen. We don't go to work saying, hey, I'm going to get injured today. So when that happened to that individual, that we have a basic fundamental understanding of how workers' compensation operates, then to have meaningful discussions with that person. So they say, wow, okay, that's why this is happening. This is what I can expect. And when these things happen, I have people on my side that can shepherd me through it. And if we can take that approach, I think we're going to have a better chance in the next 5 years of minimizing the impact of some of the bad legislation that's coming through Sacramento.
Amen. And I'm going to have to put you together with one of our other show hosts, been on the network for a long time. She's an attorney, specializes in employer-employee litigation. She's worked on both sides, representing both employers and employees. Usually those attorneys pick one side or the other.
Right.
And they're either attack dogs for the employer or attack dogs for the employees. But she's worked on both sides. Now she's the general counsel for the Western Growers Association.
Oh, yes.
This huge thing that represents all the farmers in Central
That's right.
California. And she preaches all the time. We could do one thing to reduce litigation and costs. Just try and talk and be a little nicer to each other. Just try
Right.
and understand. Instead of immediately seeing this is an adversarial, this is immediately going to go to litigation, all hands on deck. Let's either attack with all we've got, whatever side you've got, because that's just the way it's done, or never sort of talk this through or kind of try and understand what both sides are doing.
Right. And if you go to my website, betterwithalta.com, that's ALTA, betterwithalta.com, on our podcasts and videocasts, I have a series of blogs around how to provide expectations to the injured worker around medical care, payment of disability, how the claim should resolve. And that's really what we're going to do today. We're going to very briefly go through some of this stuff. And again, if you're interested after hearing this videocast podcast, please visit my website and take a look at some of those articles.
All right. Well, amen. With no further ado, take us on the journey of an injured worker. What happens after what happens to decide they're injured?
Right. So I'm going to talk about Sam. He's a 47-year-old delivery driver. He delivers packages. He has worked for this package delivery company for 25 years. He leaves his family in the morning. He goes to work. Everything's great. He's in a good mood. He's walking up to a home to deliver a package, and he trips over a hose that's on the sidewalk, and he injures his back. He can't get up. He throws his back out. He calls his dispatch and says, "Hey, I'm at this home. I can't get up. I need help." The homeowner witnessed it, so they call an ambulance, and they come and get Sam, and they take him to the nearest emergency room. And so in that emergency room, you have an emergency room physician that quickly evaluates Sam, tells him, "Hey, I think you've strained your lumbar, et cetera, et cetera. Here is, unfortunately, 30 days of oxycodone, and
Yeah, right.
go follow up with your physician, your general physician." Okay. So he does that. He fills his oxycodone, and he sees his regular doctor. Now, in the meantime, the dispatch center has reported the claim to the carrier, to their claims administrator. Mm-hmm. And the claims administrator is now trying to get a hold of Sam. And Sam is not able to return their phone calls. And Sam goes and sees his general physician. His general physician says, "Oh, wow, I think you need an MRI. I think you need 4 weeks of physical therapy. Maybe don't take the oxycodone. Here's another prescription, and come back and see me in 2 weeks." So Sam's like, "Okay, I feel taken care of. I know this doctor. I've seen this doctor for 10 years. I trust their opinion, and I'm going to do what they say." They get a call from the carrier, and the carrier says, "Hey, I just got this injury in the door, and I need to conduct an investigation. I need to figure out what happened. I need to call the homeowner, and I need to ask you a series of questions. And by the way, you can't go see your regular doctor." And Sam is like, "What do you mean I can't go see my regular doctor?"
So immediately we're sort of creating a confrontation.
Friction. Right?
Friction. There you go.
Yeah, confrontation, friction. So Sam says, "Look, I like my doctor. I trust my doctor. They've told me I need all these things." And the examiner's like, "I understand, but your employer is in what is called a medical provider network." Arnold Schwarzenegger in 2003 with Senate Bill 899 put forth a medical provider network where the employer works with the carrier to select physicians that they feel are good at treating work injuries. Sometimes they scorecard these physicians on how well they do their job. And the employer...
Because your family physician may or may not know the intricacies of all these things. They do. They're a generalist, but maybe they don't know the specialist.
Most of the times, Paul, they won't treat a work-related injury.
Really?
Just for those things, because they don't want to do the reporting. Not that they don't want to. They don't know how to do the reporting. They don't want to take. They don't want to take the payment that's
Make
per
a mistake.
fee schedule.
Right.
So immediately there's confusion, there's anxiety, there's trepidation. So the examiner says, "Look, you need to go see Dr. Smith down the street because Dr. Smith is in the medical provider network and we can direct the first appointment. If you don't like Dr. Smith, then you can go online and you can go select a doctor that you want to go see." Sam says, "Well, by the way, my doctor tells me I need this physical therapy. I need an MRI." And the examiner says, "Unfortunately, we can't recognize any of those things. We can't even take a look at the report.
Yikes.
You have to go see Dr. Smith. And what Dr. Smith says, then we'll try to figure it out from there.
And let me stop you for 1 second. So he may have gotten your worker here may have actually gotten 2 sets of advice. The physician that saw him in the emergency room,
Yes.
or the whatever they call these little clinics that
Right.
you show up at, emergency clinic. What, they have a name for those? I always forget.
Yeah, urgent care centers.
Urgent care centers,
Right.
right. He goes to the urgent care center. He may have inadvertently given you some ideas. I think you're fine, or no, this really looks bad. He gave you a prescription for OxyContin
Right.
off the top, which has addictive possibilities
That's
to
right.
it here, which can lead to further problems down the road.
Absolutely.
Now your doctor contradicts that and says, take that back and let's try this.
Here's an anti-inflammatory.
And then a third, now he's saying, wait a minute, I got to go see a third person for
Right.
this?
Right.
Wow. Okay.
Right. And Sam's back's thrown out. He doesn't feel good.
Right.
So he goes to Dr. Smith. He has to wait an hour to see Dr. Smith. He gets in to see the physician. They don't have a good bedside manner. The physician says, no, you don't need an MRI right away. But yeah, maybe you need some physical therapy. We'll go ahead and request that. And then, so now Sam is really confused, right? Because he says, well, I thought I needed these things. So he tries to go online once he gets the 10-page initial packet from the carrier on his rights and workers' compensation.
Wow.
He tries to go online. He's having a hard time. He can't figure it out because he wants to select another doctor.
Mm-hmm.
He calls the examiner. The examiner does not answer the phone. He leaves a message. The examiner takes 2 days to call him back. So that
And he's hurting.
he's hurting. That whole entire time, he has no idea what's going on, and he can't go to work. So Dr. Smith says, you're going to be off work for 2 weeks, or you come back and see me. So now he's waiting to find out from the examiner, are you going to pay me for my lost time? What kind of care am I going to get?
Yeah.
So he goes ahead and he figures it out, and he schedules an appointment for another physician, and he's going to see that physician. They can't see him for 3 weeks. So he waits, and the examiner may not get back to him right away. What could the examiner have done differently? What could his employer have done differently in this scenario from what we're hearing so far?
Well, I don't know. It sounds like the employer is constrained. If he's going to get compensated, he's part of this program, he wants to go through his network. But his employee didn't know there is a network, probably even, so he wasn't ready for this. So
Right.
maybe he could have started a long time ago by telling all the employees, this is how it works.
Right. So people forget when it's not important to them, right?
Right.
But I think awareness definitely before people are hurt. Hey, this is a one pager on how
This is how it
California
works.
workers' compensation flows. The dispatch could have done a couple things differently. The dispatch could have connected him to somebody called a nurse triage. Nurse triage.
Really? Okay.
He could have spoke to a nurse while sitting there on the sidewalk at that house, and that nurse could have said, hey, we are going to send you to the emergency room, but after that you have to go to Dr. Smith. That would have bypassed him going to his personal physician.
Exactly.
It would have avoided all that confusion. The nurse could have told him.
And the aggravation, I went
Sure.
once, now I got to go
Right.
again.
The nurse could have took 10 minutes
Yeah.
to have given him, unpack a few things, given him a few expectations on what's going to happen. The examiner, when the examiner spoke to Sam, the examiner also should have reinforced those things. They should have basically almost said the same thing.
Right.
This is how the system works.
Get to him early, get to him often.
Right. They should explain that medical care that's requested by Sam's doctor, even in the medical provider network, is subject to what is called utilization review. So even the Dr. Smith says, hey, you need an MRI. That request, 3 things can happen. The examiner can authorize it outright. That is also considered utilization
So they
review.
have the power to do that.
They have the ability to do that.
Okay.
They could defer the decision if they feel the claim is not legitimate. But in Sam's case, it's legitimate. The homeowner witnessed it. We know
Because
it's
I hate
legitimate.
to say this, I'm going to just say this out loud. Many employers are going to say, oh, there's Sam again, faking an injury
Right.
because he wants to watch the football game or wants time off or whatever.
It's the bad apple
Yeah.
that runs it for the bunch.
Right.
Or send it for utilization review. So what happens when they send it to utilization review? They have a time frame. It has to be done within 5 business days of the doctors saying they need this. It goes to a nurse. The nurse looks at medical criteria. It's called the California Medical Treatment Utilization Schedule. They look at this schedule and it says, hey, he has this type of injury. This is what's being requested. It is medically necessary or it is not medically necessary. So if the nurse looks at it and it's medically necessary per those guidelines, then they just approve it. Like, okay, MRI approved. Schedule it. Let's get it done. If the criteria says it's not medically necessary, then it has to go to a physician. It has to go to a physician. They have to review it. And they may call Sam's doctor and say, hey, Why do you want this MRI? Per the guidelines, it's too early. You haven't done any conservative measures. You haven't figured out A, B, and C. And they may be able to negotiate something, or the MRI might be denied. So then what's going to happen is Sam is going to get a denial letter in the mail saying that his MRI is denied. And that is going to surprise Sam.
Boy, I'll say.
Because Sam was told
me.
Sam was told to go to the company, the quote unquote company physician through this medical provider network. So then Sam's going to say, why don't you trust your own doctor? Why are you denying that doctor's care? And it's unfortunate, but it happens. So
can I ask you one question?
Sure.
Because maybe we're getting too into this, and I'm not trying to politicize either side, but I'm thinking as an employee and as an employer, we've all heard stories of all these managed care things that keep costs down.
Yes.
But they also are there to one of the ways they keep costs down, is the perception is, at least, is that they deny things or delay things. And whereas, and I'll say in fairness, many doctors just said, here, take an MRI, take these pills, take 27 other things, partly because they could, partly because maybe they got compensated by doing other things, because it's my clinic doing the MRIs and other things.
Right.
And partly because it protects them from any future litigation. I'm going to have you do anything and everything. And the insurance carriers used to just do it all. Costs skyrocketed. So managed care came along and said, let's try and come up with some middle ground between everybody gets an MRI and nobody gets an MRI.
Right. Right. And again, the whole point of utilization review, and it's you really hit it on the head, is that workers' compensation across the country is taking a more managed care approach.
Right.
Networks, appropriate and necessity of
guidelines,
care, guidelines.
Right.
You got to do this before you can do that. And but it frustrates injured workers because they're surprised by this denial in the mail, saying they can't get something that this doctor they trust and like told them that they need.
Because they want it all. I'd want it all. If I fell and my back hurts, give me everything you got.
Right, right.
As quick as I can get it.
So in that case, what could have the examiner done differently? What could the employer done differently? And that is to provide expectations at the get-go. Hey, Sam, your doctor may request something, but guess what? It's not up to the examiner. It's not up to the carrier. It's up to the utilization review process, where a physician, another physician, will look at these requests and let you know whether or not it's medically necessary.
So you're telling me the part of good managed care, good managed cases, are managing the expectations early and often, and communicating the process.
Absolutely. And that's, as an industry, I also audit claims. I audit insurance claims. My firm does that. And the one thing that I see that the industry does not do very well is communication and avoiding surprises.
I think that is so true. I could give you 100 horror stories of my own life where a doctor, usually in something serious, my late father died several years ago. After my mother died, they were in the hospital millions of times. So many mistakes, so many miscommunications, so many that led to anxiety, led to frustration, led to almost in some cases a feeling like, let's go sue the bastards here,
Right.
I'm sorry to say it that bluntly, but it creates an anger that didn't have to be there.
Anxiety, hopelessness.
Right.
And getting an attorney sometimes gives people hope that there's somebody there that knows the system, that can shepherd them through the system. I'll have to say that unfortunately in California, there's a lot of things that are broke, and there's a lot of good attorneys out there, but there's also some bad attorneys out there.
Yeah, there's ambulance chasers that will take this and pop it into something that it's not. So, so I understand both sides. As an employer, I'm an employer too.
Right.
We fear this kind of workman's compensation litigation like crazy.
So,
and the costs seem to keep going up of all these insurances because of that.
The average litigated claim in Los Angeles is open for 4 years.
Oh. 4 years this thing's dragging out.
You don't want the case to become litigated. God. And that's why we want to talk about Sam, is because we want to figure out how to do things differently so that people don't feel like they have to go to an attorney.
And Sam doesn't want it to go on for 4 years either. Everybody's interest is to get this, is to determine, is this real or not?
Right.
Yes, I hope it is. Yours was certainly. And if it is, then let's get to it quickly and treat it right.
Right.
And get Sam back on the job and keep our costs in line and find out ways to prevent this from ever happening again.
So if we get back to Sam, so he is now being pushed out 3 weeks for a medical evaluation. The examiner states that they don't have everything they need to be able to pay Sam for his lost time.
Right. Oh my goodness.
So Sam is
they
not,
don't have what, the documents?
they don't have the documents. So Sam's not getting paid.
Oh my goodness.
3 weeks later, Sam sees the doctor and they get what they need to pay Sam. But Sam makes just a little bit more money because in California, temporary disability benefits have a cap. They have a cap. It's 2/3 their wage, but it's capped at a certain
That
amount.
silence was my mouth hitting the ground here. I didn't know there's a cap on this stuff.
So Sam is not making what he needs to make
Bong.
to support his family. So Sam goes through that journey of that he's receiving care, he's receiving therapy. He gets an MRI. He's 47. He has a compressed disc. 47-year-olds all have compressed discs.
Do they really?
Pretty
Particularly
much.
probably if he's a driver and he's lifting stuff and
Yeah.
everything here.
So Sam gets to a point where his physician feels like he's reached what is called a maximum medical improvement. He's not
Yeah.
getting any worse. He's not getting any better. And now they assess his permanent impairment.
Right.
It is evaluated by a big green book called the American Medical Association's Guidelines for Permanent Impairment. Each body part has a chapter. So the spine has a
Each body
chapter.
part has
Each
a
body has a chapter. So the doctor goes to that chapter.
Oh my God.
And they say, okay, he's lost range of motion or
Yeah.
he's, and there's certain categories, and you do tables, and then you come up with a whole person impairment that then the examiner takes through a formula for age, occupation, and comes up with a final dollar amount that Sam is now entitled to. But Sam may not understand how that works. He may think that
You think? Yeah.
he says, "Hey, my back still hurts. Like I don't feel like I can go back to work. Like you say I'm all better, but I'm not all better." So the examiner is going to contact
And you know
him.
what? No amount of money. I'm sorry to say.
Yeah.
People always say, well, and I suppose there are. I know there are cases of people just milking the system or
Right.
whatever. But there's no amount of money that makes up for a bad back.
No, and so what's really misunderstood in workers' compensation regarding versus personal injuries that comp does not pay for loss of consortium. It does not pay for pain and suffering.
What's loss of consortium?
You can't interact with your spouse
Oh, okay.
the way you used to. So comp does not compensate.
That's a nice term.
Right.
Your marriage is not quite the same.
Your marriage is not quite the same. So comp does nothing for these things. Comp only pays for your time lost from work up to a cap. It pays for medical care that's found reasonable and necessary through the utilization review process, and it pays permanent impairment per this big green book called the American Medical Association.
And is that a
Guideline for
one-time
Permanent
payment
Impairment.
or a monthly payment for life or for a period of time?
So
or-
this also is something that I think we do badly when the person is first injured. You should start the claim with the end in mind. No claim should go on forever. The conversation that you have with Sam when he's first injured is, hey, this is how you get medical care. This is how we pay for your lost time. And this is how, once you reach that maximum medical improvement, this is how we're going to resolve your case. In California, there's two ways that you can resolve a case. The first way is to pay them gradually and say, hey, you're entitled to medical care ongoing. If your back hurts, you can go back to the doctor if you need to, and you're going to be paid a certain amount of money every 2 weeks for the next amount of weeks.
But for a period of time.
For a period of time. And that is called a stipulation with request for award. And what I always told injured workers when I examine claims is that if you don't agree with me, if you don't agree with the amount on that stipulation, if you don't agree with the doctor, you have remedies, but also understand that these documents have to be approved by a judge. And the judge, when you do not have an attorney, the judge is supposed to look out for your best interests.
Okay.
So if they feel that this is not adequate, they will set it for an adequacy hearing where you and I will go down to the court. Now it's done virtually, but you'll go down to the court, talk to the judge, and the judge will say, look, I think this award is inadequate for whatever reasons. And then you figure it out and you come up with a solution. The second way that you can resolve a claim in California, and usually employers will do this if the person is no longer their employee, and this is called a compromise and release agreement. And it's just the way it sounds. You compromise on an amount of money to compensate that individual for their permanent impairment, their need for medical care, and then you're released from all future claims. They're no longer your employee. They can't come back. They can't get care, and they're
Once
just
the
done.
two sides agree, that's it.
That's
You're going
it.
to get this amount of money. And do they pay you that in a lump
They
sum?
paid in a lump sum.
Because that's what you see on that TV. Did you get a settlement? And yeah, let's.
Right. So I just, kind of to summarize a bit, we have tremendous opportunities in workers' compensation in the coming years to limit both the duration of claims, help with the cost of claims, and help with claims becoming litigated. And that is for employers to get involved to understand the basics of the system, the basics of how medical care is provided, the basics of how temporary disability is paid, the basics of how claims are resolved. So then when the injured worker is upset, they call them, say, the big mean insurance company just denied my medical care. They
Yeah.
can say, well, it doesn't quite work like that.
Or I can't get paid because they haven't filled out the form yet, or
Right.
something. Right?
That's right. So they can have the basics, right? They can have the basics to be able to have a meaningful conversation with that individual so that they understand that they're there to take care of them. They're there to call the broker, call the carrier, have a conversation with the examiner as to why this is happening, and help them get better and get back to work
And that
back
you
to being
care about
productive.
them.
And you care about that. So when people feel cared for, there's always better outcomes when it's a legitimate injury than when they
Instead
feel
of,
not
oh,
cared for.
suddenly I'm not your favorite employee. Suddenly I'm talking to lawyers.
That's
Suddenly
right.
I'm going through forms. Suddenly we're in an adversarial relationship.
That's right.
I guess I better get my attorney. I guess other people are telling you this isn't fair, this isn't right, and then pretty soon it gets amplified. Whereas if you work with them and communicate with them, and show concern, those simple steps might eliminate a lot of this
Right. And
litigation or other problems.
there's a time and place for everything. I firmly believe that, but I do think that attorneys in workers' comp, they can't change the law.
No.
They can't change the things the examiners are dealing with. They can't change the requirements the employers are dealing with. They can negotiate. They can try to argue simple points. I think attorneys are useful if you feel you were injured legitimately, but your claim has been denied. But when you have an admitted claim, the California law has a very tight procedure on how these things are done. And as long as the examiner is doing what they need to do per those requirements, then litigation is
play
really
along
not-
with the system until you think it's you've
litigation.
exhausted everything.
That's right.
All right, I know you wanted more today, but you gave me so much more than I was expecting. I thought this would be a two-step process, not a 122-step process with several subsections and sub-hearings and sub-parts to it here. Can you come back and do another one where we talk about what might change going forward?
Absolutely. I'd be glad to, Paul.
Because
Thank you.
I think I got to wrap my head around. I got to go to your site. Where's the site on some of this stuff? You have some more video? Because this really is a lot more. I've never been through a workman's comp claim, either as an employer or an employee. I didn't know it was that complicated.
So, this is why brokers are important. We have the click market now. You can click and buy insurance. You can click and basically buy any insurance.
Right.
The problem with that,
I hate to admit it. I think I've done that a couple of times there. Yeah.
the problem with that is when you have a loss,
Yeah.
especially with workers' compensation, because if you have a loss and you do not have a broker and you've got like a click policy, then there's nobody to call like me to hold the stakeholders accountable
Yeah.
and try to
And
shepherd
walk
that.
you through this.
Yeah.
And to say, what do I do now? I just
Right.
was trying to get the cheapest rate. I didn't know I was ever going to use this stuff.
Right.
And that there was a process in place, and it's confusing, and it's costing me more money. And oh my goodness, I'm in trouble. Help! And they're like, press 1, press 2, press 3.
That's right. That's absolutely right.
Well, let's press hold on this for today and have you come back. That's a really interesting, quick overview of what happens, the journey of an injured worker. I want to hear going forward what might happen if some of these news laws take place.
Right.
All right. Thanks for joining us, Eddy Canavan from
Alta
Claims.
and
Go.
Insurance Services. You can reach me at betterwithalta.com. You can call our office at 877-ALTA-111. Thank you so much, Paul.